You'll remember this view from last autumn when we were having a go at ploughing this old meadow up with a view to making it a wildflower meadow this year. As you can see, the soil was clodden, wet. Although it had dried out quite a lot, it was still a big old pull for the tractor, and you can see the state of some of these clods. We rather hoped during the winter that the weather, the frost, perhaps a bit of snow, would break this up and make it easier to pull down in the spring, which to some degree happened, although we didn't get that much frost during the winter time. But it did break up the big clods, but there were still some big lumps there. So we spent quite a lot of time pulling it about with disc harrows, harrowing and rolling. And this is the late stage of doing that. Fergie did quite well pulling the rolls. That was quite successful, and it did well pulling harrows, but what it did struggle a bit was with the discs. So I did the first couple of circuits with the Fergie with the discs, but it was like trying to cut up the Himalayas. So we decided in bringing in the bigger weapons with the discs to try and chop things up a bit. As you can see, the David Brown with an extra 15 horsepower picked the discs up and got through this fairly easily, and it wasn't really troubled at all. So we had some good fun getting through it and cutting up the clods and levelling everything. There were quite a lot of holes, but they've now sort of disappeared as we've levelled everything off. Friends and I who were doing the Wildflower Meadow got very involved in sowing the seed. What I forgot to do, I could make other excuses like equipment failure, but it was actually my own stupidity. I didn't record the seed fiddle, which is what we use to sow the seed, and this is the seed fiddle if you've never seen one before. They're a funny old, probably Victorian invention, might have been a bit before, but thereabouts. So what it is a box, beautifully made. This is an original, borrowed from Chris, a mate of mine locally, and we've used this a couple of times for wildflower meadows, and it is literally a fiddle. You can see how it works. So the seed goes in the top here. We put wildflower seed, we double the volume by adding some dry sand to it, because wildflower seed is very fine. It's not like ordinary grain seed. It's very fine, so we doubled it up because we had 3/4 of an acre to do with an enormous cost in wildflower seed. The cost is absolutely horrendous. Anyway, in this bag at the top here, I'll show you inside it in a minute, is where you put the seed in there. It flows down to the front, and underneath here, I hope you can see that, is where the seed runs through. You've got an adjuster here that adjusts the size of the hole coming out the hopper. Not only that, but as you fiddle with it, the seed gets thrown off this disc at the front here. It does it quite effectively. It does about 2 meters width if you do it with a bit of energy. But there's actually a little jiggler underneath there, so this is on a cam here, and that just jiggles to make sure the seed doesn't get blocked. We had 1 or 2 cock-ups in that the sand I put in had got 1 or 2 lumps in it, so it did jam itself up a couple of times, but it worked very well. The problem with it is it's heavy and hellishly awkward. So you carry this in your left hand like this. That bit there, this bit, I think you can see that, I'll try and have a check that in a minute. goes forwards, and then you have a rope goes through these holes here, one there, over your shoulder, that takes some of the weight, and off you go fiddling, and it works just like that. Unfortunately, we're not used to carrying things like that, and it is heavy when it's got seed in, and awkward, and it's like trying to pat your stomach and pat your head at the same time. It is an awkward thing to use, but you do get the hang of it in the end, and you end up getting your fiddle movements going with your foot movements, and you do get a rhythm going, but it is not an easy thing to hold, and it's when you've done a field, well, we did 3/4 of an acre, and there was some pain involved. I think if you did 40 acres or 20-acre field, it would be even worse. But there we are. That is the seed fiddle. Marvellous piece of engineering. It succeeded chucking it on just with a bucket and using your hand, which is quite difficult to get an even seed spread, but obviously not as good as a horse-pulled drill like the Smythe drill, which is made here in Suffolk. But it was for smaller acreages. It was a bit of a revolution, I would imagine. The seed fiddle. So this is looking down inside to the fiddle. You can just see that. You can see the gaps in the bottom where the seed goes through. And this is the container here. The seed sits in. But if we come round to the front, you can see the business end of where the cam is and where the hole goes through. It's quite a simple thing. I'm sure it was revolutionary when it was designed, but if you look at a modern fertilizer spreader on the back of a tractor, that sort of spinner is still being used. Most of them have got hydraulically driven spinners, and probably 2 or 3 on the back of the fertilizer spreader. Same sort of thing. So the principle's the same, but these days it's in tons rather than carrying probably a kilo or so of seed in that hopper at the back. Well, this was the last harrowing, the end of this fairly lengthy exercise over the last week or so. Weather's been absolutely perfect for this. The land has dried out quite well, but this is going with the harrows and just harrowing the seed in to get decent contact between the seed and the soil. The harrows are only going in a couple of inches, so it's just enough to get the seed in contact with the ground. And then obviously the next stage is to give it a bit of a rolling. Funny, this piece of land here looks fairly level as you walk about, but if you listen to the revs on the tractor, you can see it's definitely running downhill at the moment, and when it gets down to the bottom and comes back up the other side, you can feel the old Fergie banging away a bit, pulling the rolls, which I don't know what they weigh, but they must weigh half a ton, perhaps even a bit more. On soft ground they certainly take some pulling. the owner of the land who's driving the tractor. He's not had much experience of tractor driving before. And I asked him how he was getting on with the Fergie. And he said, I could do this all day. He said, it's really enjoyable. And I must admit, on a sunny day, when it's not too hot and not too muddy, a nice land, it's a nice job.